Today I'm talking to Dr. Rupa Badlani, a Bay Area native and dermatologist at Kaiser Permanente Oakland. She grew up in the Berkeley Hills, went to Cal for undergrad, UC Irvine for med school, and completed her dermatology residency, serving as chief resident at UCSF. At Kaiser, she focuses on medical dermatology from acne to psoriasis to diagnosing and treating skin cancers, and she's a big believer in prevention and integrated care. We also got into parenting, community, and passing Indian culture to the next generation. This was a really fun and engaging conversation. Very entertaining. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming on. I guess to start things off, tell me more about where you grew up, what you do now, what keeps you busy, and like the most exciting thing about the work you do.
Sure. So my name's Rupa. I grew up here in the Bay Area, in the Berkeley Hills, basically. I actually went to Head-Royce just for middle school, for seventh and eighth grade, a very long time ago. I ended up going to Cal for undergrad and then UC Irvine, in Orange County for medical school. And UCSF in San Francisco for my residency. I'm a dermatologist. Now, fast forward to now, I live in Orinda, not too far from, Oakland and Head-Royce, just through the tunnel. And I work at Kaiser Oakland as a dermatologist there in their clinic. And what keeps me busy at home is basically our three kids. My husband's name is Sean, and then we have three kids named Arjun, Jay, and Layla. Arjun is going into fifth grade at Head-Royce. Jay is going into third grade, and then Layla is going to be applying for kindergarten now. So they keep me busy, very busy between them and like all their activities and things. And then for work, mainly I work in the clinic at Kaiser Oakland, seeing patients. And then occasionally we go into the hospital and we do hospital consults as well. Probably the best thing about our work is, as cheesy as it is, like we really do get to help a lot of people every day. So we see hundreds of, not me personally, but our clinic on a whole sees hundreds of patients every day, mainly medical dermatology. So a lot of skin cancers, melanomas, patients with really awful skin diseases like psoriasis and really bad eczema and skin diseases that affect their life a lot day to day. And we are really able to improve the quality of life for the vast majority of a lot of these patients, whether it's by like a surgery to remove a skin cancer, or whether it's through medication for a particular condition they have. So it's very gratifying, I think, in that sense.
No, yeah, that's definitely a good benefit. I guess like more on your college experience. I guess how would you describe that, and when did you know like what kind of career that you wanted to pursue?
Let's see, college, I think, when you go to a big school like Berkeley, or let's say, UCLA, or even some of the other UCs like San Diego or Davis, it has its own challenges, I think, because these are huge schools. And I think there's a little bit less, I guess, hand holding, you could say. I don't think I ever met with like a guidance counselor kind of person at Berkeley. I'm sure they were available, but there's not really anybody really telling you kind of what to do. In a lot of ways, you're figuring things out on your own or with your friends. And the classes are very big, especially when you're, pre-med or something. So like my chemistry class had like 1,500 kids in it. You kind of have to be resourceful and make sure that you're kind of on your own. So you have to be diligent about studying and making timelines for yourself. If you need extra help, you need to go and seek out that tutoring or seek out help from the professor or the TAs. And I think at the end of 4 years there, you get pretty good at that.
Did
So,
that
but I loved,
experience
I
kind of,
loved,
or did that experience kind of like mirror what you did in like high school and in the Bay Area, or was it different?
I think it was different because when you go to college, there's just like a freedom that you don't have when you're in high school at home, when you're still kind of like under the care of like your parents day to day. So, for instance, like let's say you have in college, let's say you have an 8 a.m. class. No one is really like waking you up to like make sure you get to that class, right? So you either wake yourself up and you make sure you get there, or if you miss the class and you miss a bunch of classes and you get a poor grade on a test, like you learn the hard way. So I think there's just a lot of freedom in college, which is what's so amazing about it, right? But then it's up to you as the student to kind of figure out the balance of work and play. Like you have to study whatever college you go to, whatever major you're in, you're going to have classes, you're going to have midterms, you're going to have essays, whatever it is. And so you're going to have to study, you're going to have to put in the work. But at the same time, you're also at college to socialize, to make friends, to join student groups. Some people play sports or intramural sports. There's a lot going on. And so in those 24 hours in a day or like 16 hours that you're awake, it's up to you to kind of figure out how to divide up your time. And that's one of the challenges, I think, in the beginning. And I think as time goes on in college, you get more used to it. But really like time management, which hopefully people are starting to learn, I think, in high school, when you're balancing a lot of coursework and extracurricular activities. But then once you get to college, your parents are not there all the time telling you, okay, you got to do this, you got to do that. You have to do it on your own. You end up learning how to
Yeah.
do that on your own.
No, yeah. And then specifically what you said about parents, I guess like a lot of this podcast has to do with like whether or the ways in which Indian and American culture is like passed on from parents to children. So like sort of directing this to you as a parent, like what was your experience kind of growing up as an Indian American in the Bay Area? And then how do you like compare that experience to like now when you're raising children in the Bay Area?
I mean, I think mine was pretty typical, like certain aspects of it for that generation. So, like, my parents came here. My mom's a doctor. She came after she finished medical school, but she had to like take all her tests and everything here to start her residency. She's an anesthesiologist. She's retired now. And my dad is a microbiologist, like a scientist. He's also retired now. But for them, and like many Indian immigrants, especially at that time, for us, it was like your education is the most important thing. And school was like our job. And I'm referring to me and I have a younger brother who's like 5 years younger than me. And it was like we had to take school seriously. We had to turn in our homework on time. We had to study hard for tests. We had to get good grades. And if we didn't, we were going to hear about it from our parents. And so I think in that way, honestly, it was very typical. They also did, in a very cliche way, like encourage us to go into medicine. They did not any specific area of medicine per se, but my mom encouraged me to go into medicine. They encouraged my brother to go into medicine. He is a urologist. He works at the University of Michigan. And I don't think they cared too much, like within medicine, what I did exactly. But to them, especially as immigrants, I think they thought of it as like, this is a stable career. And if I become a doctor, I'll always be able to get a job. That I think that was basically their way of thinking. So I think I grew up in a very typical way in that sense. Now, fast forward to now with my kids, there are some things that are the same, exactly the same. Like we really do emphasize school a lot in our house. And granted, they don't have that much homework yet. They're still in the lower school, but they have to do their homework. They have to do it on time. They have to study if they have a test. They have got to listen to their teachers. Like, we are strict about that. And then I think ways in which things are a little different is we probably have put a little more emphasis on like extracurricular things and letting them explore other interests outside of school, whatever it may be, like soccer and swimming and art. Both of the boys like to play flag football, and one is going to start water polo, and just letting them explore like a few other extracurricular activities and seeing what they like over time. Whereas I think when I grew up, it was a little bit more rigid, just like it's just about academics. So we're trying to make sure we stress the academics, but also let them find things that they enjoy outside of school to kind of make sure they're well rounded. And then the other kind of thing I would say just about growing up being Indian is like obviously over time in the Bay Area, there's more and more like South Asians and Indian people, in the Bay Area as a whole and in the East Bay especially. But with the next generation, like, my parents came from India. And so I grew up very Indian, like watching a lot of Indian movies and eating a lot of Indian food and that sort of thing. And so I think always with the next generation, it gets naturally a little bit diluted. And because I didn't grow up in India, right? But so we try as hard as we can to kind of make sure that we are still exposing the kids to Indian culture in whatever way that might be. And like an example is like around Diwali time, we always will like do a classroom presentation about Diwali, and we'll make sure that the kids get involved in like Diwali dances and simple things like that. But just to make sure whenever we can that they get exposed to the culture, because it's not as natural as it was when I was growing up, and my parents had come from India. So we try to emphasize that when we can.
Yeah. I think that's definitely important. And I think you make a great point about like things getting sort of like diluted as generations get passed on. I guess, has there ever been a moment in your life when you felt like caught between those two worlds? And like, how did you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been different times I think where I've been caught between those two worlds. And I think it gets easier over time, but like I think when I was in high school, there still were not like so many Asians or South Asians in the specific area I was living in. And so even if there was not anything really direct happening, with regards to like race or skin color, I think naturally if you go to a school and 90 or 95% of the school is Caucasian, let's say, and then, very small percentage Asian or South Asian, naturally, if you don't see that many people who look like you or who have, darker skin like you, naturally you'll feel some type of way about it. And I think I don't think I thought too much about it at the time, but I was just trying to get through high school, get into college, all of that. But I do remember that when I went to Cal, and it was just and I wasn't necessarily expecting this, but it was just such a big and diverse school with all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of, ethnicities and religions, and a large, Asian and South Asian population, that I did feel kind of immediately like more comfortable. And then that's where I think it starts to become, in a way, like cool to learn about your culture more and participate more in those activities. Like we always had these like cultural shows, like most of the colleges do, around Diwali time or like whenever, and you do dances and you do different things. And it that was a great like experience for me. So I think, yeah, there's times that I felt at odds about it, but I think all of that has gotten easier with kind of just growing up as as you go to college and become an adult.
Yeah, I guess what were some of those like highlights in college? Like, I guess which sort of like performances or like cultural events did you really like in doing?
Yeah, I mean, we had a big, like a big Indian club basically that's called Indus. And they would throw a lot of events and parties and social activities, but then they would always have like a big cultural show basically once a year, as well as a Diwali show. But the cultural show was pretty like fantastic. And so we would do dances in it, or they would do like fashion shows. But some of the people who participated in it were like actually really incredible, Bharatanatyam dancers or Kathak dancers or like trained musicians. And it was just really cool to like be surrounded by people who had kind of grown up the way that I had, and had all these like talents. Yeah, it was great actually, and I'm still like really good friends with my friends from college actually.
Yeah, and I guess would you say that like you being Indian American has actually had like some sort of superpower like benefit in your career or
That's interesting. I think in a way, yes. I mean, I think being Indian American and kind of the way that our many of our parents stress education to us from a young age, and just how important your education is, and taking school seriously, and that really set it set like high goals for me, I guess, in a way, and also just a very strong work ethic, which is partly just watching the way my parents worked, but also them kind of making clear that like we had to work hard as students whenever, like in high school and college, beyond. And so I think I felt like we grew up having a very strong work ethic, and that has served me well, yeah, throughout the whole thing, throughout medical school, residency, and beyond. And then the other thing is, I mean, I guess like it's also kind of cliche, but I think in America, I think people are comfortable and used to having like Indian physicians also. So I do feel like at work, for the most part, like I'm like respected by my patients. I don't get too much, I don't know. I feel generally respected. Like even though I'm a woman, or, before when I was younger, like I always still felt like I got a lot of respect for my patients. And I don't know if in part that was because I was Indian or not, but I do feel like in a way it has been a superpower.
no, yeah, that's honestly a great observation. I guess like more specifically, I know you mentioned earlier that like one of your favorite parts about your work is that like you get to help people and you get to like I guess make people happy through like physical care. So I guess like more specifically though, what about dermatology do you really like and what kind of like drew you towards that?
I think what drew me towards it initially was that you actually get to do a lot of like procedures. So you do a lot of like biopsies and small surgeries and things like that. So if you're a little bit more surgically inclined, like you like to work with your hands, then it is a good choice in that way. So that was one kind of specific thing that I liked about it. But the other big thing was that you do see a lot of the same patients over and over again. So whether a lot of patients I'll see once a year for their skin check because they've had like a bunch of skin cancers, or they have really bad eczema, so I'll see them once or twice a year. And once you've been working for like 9, 10 years or whatever, you see the same people over and over again, and you do form a bond, a patient doctor connection. So I always make a note of patients like their occupation and kind of like their social history in the chart. Oh, this is where they work, and they have 2 kids or whatever it might be. And so over time, you really get to know the patients, and that connection is actually really gratifying. In addition to the fact that you're able to help them, but every time you see them, I chat with them, like, how are your kids doing? Did you, some of them are like retirement age and they've retired, and are they traveling? And I've gotten all I've gotten all kinds of advice from my patients, actually. So I'm there to give them advice and to help them. But in return, I've had so many patients like give me travel tips about, when I was going to Europe, or they've given me advice about school for kids, because I'm dealing with an age range of patients that goes from literally like infant to like 100 years old. I have 100-year-old patients. And so they give me advice about kids. They're like, well, as someone who's raised kids and has, children in college or beyond, they also will always give me their 2 cents. And I appreciate that, because a lot of them have life experience that I don't have yet. So it's really
Yeah.
that bond between patients and doctors when you get to see the patients over and over again. That's pretty special.
Is that bond between like patients and like doctors something you kind of knew about as you were going in, or did you sort of like develop that throughout your career?
I think you know about it going in, but you don't really get it until later, because in medical school, it's like the second 2 years of medical school is when you're doing all your clinical rotations. But each clinical rotation is only like 12 weeks or sometimes 4 weeks or something. So in those short blocks, you don't really get to see patients over and over again, typically. So it's really only later, once you're doing your residency training and beyond, when you actually start your career, that there's kind of that longevity where you're seeing people for many years. So I don't think it really clicks until later.
Yeah. So I guess like what else do you enjoy doing outside of your work?
So I enjoy exercising. We have like a gym at our house because we don't really have enough time to get outside to the gym. We enjoy socializing. We live in a great neighborhood where we're friends with like a bunch of our neighbors. And I did go to, high school and college in the area. So we have a kind of a large social network here. A lot of socializing. And then really right now, most of my time is spent with the kids and helping them with all their various day-to-day like activities and their homework and all of that. And that's pretty busy, but it's very fulfilling.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess like what would you say there's something that like your non-Indian friends would find fascinating or surprising when they were to like visit your home? Or-
Oh, interesting. I have to think about that. I think it's hard to kind of put into words, but I think one thing about like the Indian culture is we're very family and kind of like community oriented. So a lot of times, like, we have big like family parties, basically, and that's how I grew up too, like with my parents, where it's like on a weekend, we'll have like 5 or 6 like Indian families over, and it's like the parents and the kids, and like we're hanging out with the parents, and all the kids are playing, even though the kids may be like a variety of ages, and building that community is very important. And it's also kind of like casual, like it's not anything formal, but it's just like, okay, come over, bring the kids over, and we'll all eat together on like a Saturday evening. And that's how I grew up, with like my parents' friends and all of their kids. And we're kind of like recreating that here with our kids. But yeah, we do have a lot of kind of like family friend gatherings, basically, with our Indian friends and like neighborhood friends.
No, yeah, I totally relate to that. I guess to like wrap things up, since we've talked a lot about like Indian wisdom and sort of like your experience growing up and how that connects to like your experience raising kids now in the Bay Area. So I guess like what would you say is the most meaningful piece of advice that you received from like an elder in your family that perfectly blends like the idea of like this Indian wisdom about how one should focus on school, etc., with like American practicality?
Um, I think that's a good question. I think the thing that my parents really instilled in me was that if I knew what I wanted and worked hard towards it, there was a pretty good chance I could get that thing, whatever it was. And it's imperfect, right? It's like not everyone is going to get accepted to like, a specific college or whatever. But I'll give you an example. It was that like I went to Irvine for medical school and I really wanted to go to UCSF for residency, which was going to be hard to get into because they don't have that many spots and all of that. And my dad was like, not in an overly confident kind of way, but he was like, why can't you get it? He was basically like, why not? He's like, if you work really hard in med school and, you do your research projects and you do all the things that, you want to do and you make it known to them that you want to go there and you try really hard in your interviews, like, why don't you think you could be one of those people who gets in there in those 7 spots? And I think that kind of stuck with me. It's like, why not like, reach for, the harder job or the harder position? The worst that can happen is like it doesn't work out. But my parents always instilled in me like, as long as you work hard, you should try to get that harder position or that harder job. There's no reason that you can't. And I think for me specifically, also because I have a younger brother, they never differentiated between us. Like if my brother could do it, I could do it. Like it didn't matter if you were a boy or a girl at all. And so I think I still like hold on to that, just like, work hard and reach for the stars and it'll all work out.
No, yeah, I think that mindset's definitely key to a lot of things. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation.